Buzz. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everyone. Almost 23 after the hour, and today we're taking another look at that study that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has recently put out that shows that marijuana using drivers are no greater crash risk than sober drivers. And this one is a bombshell, especially to puncture the talking points of the prohibitionists out there that fear the stoned mayhem on the freeways if we were to legalize marijuana. Last year, there was a congressional hearing on this issue, and the representative from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, his name's Jeff Michael. He's an associate administrator for research and program development. He was asked about how many crash fatalities does marijuana cause each year? You know, this is the big fear. We're going to legalize. There's going to be wrecks on the freeways. Well, it's not as if legalization invents marijuana. If marijuana were going to cause people to wreck, we should have seen it by now. So asking this researcher from National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, how many wrecks are there? Seems like a pretty straightforward question. The response from the associate administrator for research and program development was, quote, "That's difficult to say. We don't have a precise estimate." That's it. We're supposed to be so afraid of this stone driving menace, and yet we don't have a precise estimate of how much stone driving there is. The best we could get out of the guy was to say it's probably not zero. It's a non-zero number. Now, this study that was released last Friday was the first large-scale crash risk study in the United States to include drugs other than alcohol, and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration found that after you adjusted for confounding variables, cannabis consumption was not associated with an increased probability of accident. Now, there was a 25% greater risk of crash for people that had marijuana in their systems. This is active THC in the blood. But that 25% risk dropped down to 5% greater risk when they accounted for age and gender. See, the thing is people who consume marijuana most often tend to be young males, and young males tend to crash their cars more. So once you accounted for all that, a young male pot smoking driver was no worse than a young male non-pot smoking driver, and so forth. And then once you figured in alcohol to the equation, if any of those pot smoking drivers also had alcohol in their system, that extra 5% disappeared as well. And there is virtually statistically no difference at all between a marijuana only driver and a sober driver. This was over 3,000 drivers they tested in Virginia and another 6,000 controls they tested to make sure they had all the variables accounted for. In fact, there's a great graphic that they've posted, and I've got this on my Pinterest account if you want to check this out. But adjusted odds ratios between drug use and crash risk, adjusted for demographic variables and alcohol use. That is, when we account for whether or not they're drinking, how old they are, what gender they are. Here are the risks. Marijuana, no extra risk. All legal drugs, 2% greater risk. All illegal drugs, 1% lower risk. Lower risk of crash on all illegal drugs? Well, part of that might be explained by the fact of stimulants were an 8% lower risk. So yeah, maybe being alert, being on speed in some sort is going to have a lower crash risk than a sober driver who might get tired and fall asleep at the wheel. There were greater risks, 17% and 19% respectively, for narcotic analgesics and sedatives. So painkillers and sedatives were much more likely to be a crash risk than whether or not someone had used THC. And of course, when it comes to alcohol, that's the big one. That's the one we all know is the big crash risk. And of course, the data once again bear that out. Someone at 0.08 blood alcohol level is double the crash risk. Someone at 0.10 is 6 times the crash risk. And someone at 0.15, 12 times the crash risk. Marijuana users, even. But that doesn't mean that the reporters out there covering this story actually understand what it is they are covering. In the USA Today, Chris Woodyard summarized the story this way. He said, quote, "The study showed that marijuana users are more likely to be involved in crashes, but it also points out that marijuana is smoked mostly by young men, the group with the highest propensity for accidents anyway." Right, but that's misleading to say that they're more likely to be involved in crashes, because we're not. The second sentence erases the first sentence. This more likely to be involved in crashes was erased by the fact that once you controlled for the demographics, it was even. Similarly, the headline in the story said, "Study finds new driving threat from dopers, druggies." No, it didn't. No new driving threat. No increased crash risk from people using marijuana. And in the Washington Post, they said, "There are fewer drunk drivers on the road, but their place has been taken by people high on marijuana and prescription drugs." But no, that's not exactly what it said either. The main point to be taken away from this, marijuana use does not increase crash